Hello, thank you for joining us for the 26-27 Organizational Grant Program Application Workshop. My name is Rosalind Escobar, and I will be leading you through and guiding you through the application process for this grant program. The Organizational Grant Program, which we call OGP, provides financial support to assist and strengthen nonprofit arts organizations who are providing high-quality arts programming throughout the county of Los Angeles. These are 2-year grants, project-based funding, but the project can really be anything. It's general operating support. And the funding is meant to support and boost the capacity of the organization who is applying for funding. The organizations who apply will receive 2 years of funding and are required to provide a cash match for every dollar of the grant. There are some eligibility requirements to apply for the Organizational Grant Program, and so we have them here on the screen. We would require any applicant to have tax-exempt status, or if not tax-exempt status, then if they're applying with a fiscal sponsor, the fiscally sponsored organization should be located in California, and the agreement between the sponsor and the sponsee should be a Model A comprehensive agreement. Principal offices for the organization should be in LA County. We do review the 990 tax forms to make sure that the headquarters address on those forms are an LA County address. The primary mission of the organization should be to provide arts programming, and 50% or more of the organization's budget should be dedicated to arts programming and activities. There should be a functioning board of directors and at least 2 years of programming during the last 2 years, 23 to 25. Organizations who are not eligible to apply would be organizations whose primary mission is to raise funds and not to do programming. Organizations who are educational institutions like universities or schools, organizations with a primary mission that is not focused in the arts. However, you may be eligible for a different grant program called the Community Impact Arts Grant. Individual artists are not eligible for this grant. City or county departments or agencies and their 501c3 partners are not eligible. If you're using a fiscal sponsor and the agreement with that sponsor is not a Model A agreement, you would not be eligible. If you're a social service, religious, or welfare organization, you would not be eligible. Also, organizations that are not open to the public are not eligible, and organizations who have not met all grant requirements in the prior cycle for this program would not be eligible. We also have project eligibility requirements. They're on the screen here. So the organizations who apply should have thought through this and what they would use this funding for. Though most of these applications and requests for funding, most of the time these are requests to support staff salaries. But it's a wide array of types of uses with this funding. And so we give you some examples here. You can support regular season activities, operational costs like securing a rehearsal space, putting marketing activities together, paying artists and or associated activities. You can pay for any of the phases of a project from planning through implementation, and what you support in year 1 does not have to be the same in year 2. It can evolve in terms of what the project scope is. You can support existing projects. They don't need to be brand new projects to be eligible for the grant. And it can be any type of small or large project. We also support virtual programming. Though there are many types of uses for this grant, projects that are not eligible would be projects that are to support scholarly research, projects performed or exhibited outside of Los Angeles County, programs that are not accessible to the public, purchase of major equipment, land, buildings, or construction, maintenance or existing facilities or other capital expenditures. Travel or housing, hospitality or food costs would not be fundable. Funds that are going directly into trusts, endowments, or cash reserves. Fundraising activities such as costs for gala or other fundraising activities. Projects that have a religious or proselytizing purpose. Participation in another Department of Arts and Culture program is not fundable, and projects that support, sponsor, or are related to competitions are also not fundable. On the screen, you're seeing a checklist of the financial and other types of documentation that you should prepare before opening the application. So we put this here at a glance to support you in preparing to apply. You can see here the very first portion of this list has to do with financial requirements. So as you're putting your application together, one major component will be getting some of these pieces. So the main thing or the very first step you would want to take is to make sure you've got completed your cultural data profiles in the SMU Data Arts website, which we will talk about in just a second. You will need to make sure you've got at least 3 years of your most recent fiscal year data in the SMU Data Arts cultural data profiles. You would download a funder report, which is a summary of those 3 years of data. You would need to also have a copy of your most recent federal Form 990 taxes. If you're a fiscally sponsored organization, it would be your fiscal sponsor's taxes and then the fiscal sponsor's internal financials. Organizations who have a budget over $2 million would also need a financial review or audit to submit with their application, and that should be also submitted with these documents. There's some new requirements, and the first one that you're seeing here are we do now require a screenshot of the Secretary of State active status of the organization, and also a new form that will be filled out called the Levine Act Compliance Contribution Agent Declaration Form, which you will see in the application. In addition to that, we have our Cultural Equity and Inclusion Statement, Policy, or Plan. That document, along with the proof of board adoption, would be required, and then artistic documentation, some type of artistic sample, whether video, PowerPoint, audio, published materials, or images, just depending on the discipline of the organization. When you're preparing to apply, you also have some additional pieces that you might want to add. So these would be the supplemental pieces, things like letters of recommendation or reviews. Especially if you're a brand new organization, I would recommend submitting a letter of recommendation or more than one. And then if you're an arts education organization providing arts education programming, you would also want to have a lesson plan or a curriculum sample ready to submit with your application. The organizational grant program uses categories, internal categories that staff use in order to understand the types of organizations, the capacity, and the overall kind of scale of the organizations who are applying. So you're seeing here on the screen, the table at the top is showing you how we figure out what budget category is linked to what budget size. So budgets under $200,000 are OGP1 organizations. OGP2 are $200,000 to under $1 million budget category organizations. OGP3 are organizations with a budget of $1 million to $15 million, and organizations who are in OGP4 are organizations with a budget over $15 million. So all applicants will fall under one of these 4 categories, and the request, the amount that you can request is based on your budget size. And so you're going to see what we mean by OGP funder report and OGP budget size in just a second. But just know that the way that you calculate those numbers, it's based on your funder report, which is why we have you start with your cultural data profiles in order to get that funder report downloaded. Here's a quick at a glance list of the financial documents that we just talked about for preparing your application. Again, if your budget is under $2 million, you have two financial documents, the funder report and the federal form 990 that need to be submitted. If your budget is over $2 million, then you would also be submitting a financial audit or financial review with those other two documents. One thing that we require, or something that to remember when you're submitting these documents, is that they need to be recent documents that are showing recent numbers. So we don't accept financial documentation that is older than December 2023. So anything that you submit should have a date ending December 2023 or 2024 or 2025. For audits, for those who need to submit the financial audit or review, it can go back to June 2023, but nothing before that. So how do you figure out your budget size? Here on the screen, you're seeing the top portion of a sample OGP funder report. And we're showing you this so that you can kind of take a look and see what it looks like once you download the proper document. We want to make sure that you're downloading the correct document from the SMU Data Arts website. They do have several different types of funder reports. The one that we need is the LA County Department of Arts and Culture OGP funder report. This is what it looks like. And this is basically a summary of the last 3 years of data. It's very important to have this document before you begin your application. And the main reason it's very important is that it has a very important number. This number here is what you're going to use to calculate your request amount. This number is what we call the OGP budget size. And we just want to make sure to emphasize that when we ask you what is your budget size in the application, you're not using your revenue or expense numbers from your 990. You are using the funder report to answer this question. And so this here is the number that you would use on your funder report. You will see a red number on page 1 at the very top. Use that number to calculate what your request amount will be. So you must do this first, download this report before you can do the rest of the app. Before you can even calculate your request, you need to do this. Okay, so what is SMU Data Arts? SMU Data Arts is a website. It's not hosted by us. It's a website that is hosted by a university, the Southern Methodist University Data Arts team. This website, it's an online tool and system for collecting and standardizing financial and programmatic information about organizations and their contributions to the cultural sector. All applicants need to start here. Log in or register for a new account and begin completing your cultural data profiles for the last 3 years. This database will help you to sort out your financial and programmatic information, and it will organize your information so that when you are uploading this to the application, it's all in one document that's very easily reviewed by our panel reviewers. And we don't also ask you this in our application. It's all done through the cultural data profiles. So once you've gone here, completed this here at www.culturaldata.org, then you can download your funder report and begin completing the next steps. So again, you're completing the data, cultural data profiles, completing the balance sheet, and then downloading the funder report and making sure to attach it in your application. If you need help as you're going through this, here is a 1-800 number. and an email that you can use to get in touch with the SMU Data Arts team. Okay, so again, when you get that funder report, you're going to use your budget size on that funder report, the red number, to calculate your budget, your request amount based on that budget size number. So this is a screenshot of what that looks like on our website. You can also do it in the application, but if you want to prepare beforehand, before you even begin that application, you can go into our website here, www.lacountyarts.org/OGP grant request calculator, and use our grant request calculator to figure out what your request would be. You would, again, use that budget size, pop it into this box, click the calculate button, and then after that, you will see a number pop up here that says what your grant request amount is for those 2 years that you're requesting funding for. So we encourage you to apply for all of that, for the whole 100% of that maximum request. Don't cut it in half. Use the whole number and apply for that full amount in your application. Just know that no organization will receive that number because we don't have enough funding in our program allocation to support everyone at 100%. So we encourage you to apply for all of that, knowing that you might have an award that's actually more like 39% of that number. How are our awards calculated? We begin with that budget size and we get our request amount based off of that number. It's a percentage of that number. We multiply that number, that maximum request number, by your score from the panel. And then from there, we get everyone's final number, which is the maximum allowable request. And we figure out what percentage of that we can distribute based on our final total program budget. Here is a more concrete view of what that looks like. So if you are a $200,000 organization and your request is $43,700 based on that number from our request calculator, and you get a great score of 98, we would multiply 98 by this number, and we would have a fundable request of $42,875. That's what you're eligible for, but we will shrink that number down to be able to support all the grantees in the pool. So for this example, this grantee received more like $20,000. And just for context, last year, our grantee pool, we had about 261 grantees who were funded, and we distributed about 5.5 million to that group, and each of them received 39% of that number, of that maximum fundable request. So it will be, we do not know yet how many grantees will be in this pool. That will affect how much funding there will be to go around. And so those are kind of the main numbers that affect the final award is the score from the panel and the amount of funding there is in the pool, as well as how many grantees there are in the pool. So this percentage will fluctuate from year to year. And so at the time that we figure out our program allocation and how many grantees, that's when we will figure out what your final request or final award amount will be based on that fundable request. The OGP uses project categories. We have 4 project categories that you can choose from. Note that OGP 4 organizations, our largest budget organizations, may only select accessibility as a project category. So all the others, OGP 1 through 3, you would use this project category as a way to frame your request. And so what you might want to do is figure out what is your biggest need, what is the biggest need of the organization, and how would you use this funding to support or address those needs. And after you've figured that out, you can select the project category that aligns the best with that request or story. So I'll talk a little bit about these project categories. The sustainability project category is to support existing artistic and/or administrative projects that help to sustain the mission and goals of the organization. This could be continued compensation and benefits for staff, ongoing cost of production supplies, equipment, or rent, continuing support for marketing, governance, or fund development activities, continuation of artistic programming, such as payments to artists or production staff, or continuing IT efforts like computer upgrades, software, and website improvements. Organizational capacity is for new projects. Very similar, it's for capacity and infrastructure, but new projects. So this would be establishment of new administrative staff positions, significant IT improvements like implementation of accounting, box office, or fund development software, development and implementation of new plans or strategies like marketing or public relations strategies, research or cultural equity and inclusion initiatives. Also board development activities, strategic planning, new development activities like an individual giving program, or the development of earned income strategies like development of revenue through concessions or rental activities. Artistic capacity is meant to support new projects that increase the artistic product of the organization. So additional salaries or benefits or fees for staff that are affecting the artistic product would be supported here. Commissions of new work, increased rehearsal time for performing artists, exhibition costs, and training opportunities for teaching artists. This could also support employment for one or more of the positions that impact the artistic product as well. So technical designers, technical directors, lighting, or costume designers. And then lastly, we have accessibility. These are funding for organizations who want to support new or existing projects that provide public access to arts activities and programs. We work off of a cultural equity and inclusion value and vision and value statement here at the LA County Department of Arts and Culture. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of history about our cultural equity and inclusion work, not just at our department, but across the county, LA County departments. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of the requirements that has to do with this work. So in 2015, the Board of Supervisors who fund the OGP program adopted a motion to create a framework for advancing cultural equity among the region's art and cultural sector. In 2016, the department began that journey through a public process. Several town halls throughout the county were held, stakeholder focus groups, research and an advisory committee was put together. After that, in 2017, the department released a report that summarized 13 recommendations that came out of that process, which were subsequently approved by the Board of Supervisors, 5 being funded. In 2018, one of those 5 that were funded was the requirement for organizations applying to the OGP to provide a statement, policy, or plan regarding their cultural equity and inclusion, vision, and values with their application. So since then, we've also, from 2020 to 2025, have made some other progress. We've created a cultural policy for the county, which was established in 2020. And also the Board of Supervisors established an anti-racist policy agenda. And it has been in the implementation phase since 2025. So we're now in implementation phase of this work. And these last 2 pieces together provide a foundation for pushing our vision even further as we continue to strive and foster diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, and all that we do through a deeper commitment to reversing structural and systemic inequality in LA County. So I'll go more into what our cultural equity and inclusion requirement is here. You can read more about it in our guidelines. But just as a brief kind of summary, we have requirements based on budget size here, and that's what you're seeing here on this table. For OGP 1, the minimum requirement is a statement. The minimum requirement for OGP 2 is a statement, but a policy is encouraged. For OGP 3, minimum is a policy, a plan is encouraged for this group. And then for OGP 4, policy and plan both are required. And remember, it's not just the document, the statement, policy, or plan, but the proof of board adoption as well. So what do we mean by statement, policy, or plan? Statement is a brief explanation of why the organization is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and the alignment of that commitment to the overall mission of the organization. Policy is more about figuring out what you're doing to realize that statement. And so you're providing that information in your policy. And then your plan is how you do it. So organizations are basically explaining what the policy is, how they go about moving that policy forward, and putting a plan together that addresses the 5 key areas laid out in the report that have to do with our cultural equity and inclusion vision and values here. So you will be required to submit at the minimum 1, if not 2 of these pieces, as well as the proof of board adoption, which could look like board minutes. It could look like a board resolution, and some formal way, some proof of the formal adoption of this by your board. And so you'll want to make sure you've prepared that as you're beginning to apply. Oh, and the 5 key areas that I was referring to are board of directors, staffing, audience and participants, programming, and artists or creators. And so those are the 5 key areas that would need to be addressed in a plan when a plan is submitted. Here's a checklist for cultural equity and inclusion requirement. Again, you can read the report, have a discussion with your board members, and have them approve that statement, policy, or plan, and submit the proof of board adoption with that statement, policy, or plan. In addition, we have artistic documentation requirements. So depending on what your discipline is, you will be providing either images through a PowerPoint slideshow or a Google slideshow, a video, or published materials. And you can read more about the actual guidelines around this or the rules around this in the guidelines. But if you're submitting a video, you can make that. You are allowed to give us no more than a 5-minute long video. If you're submitting a PowerPoint or a slideshow, no more than 10 images in that slideshow. If you're submitting published materials and or audio, either one, you have two uploads or 2 hyperlinks that you're allowed to submit. So you have quite a bit of space in order to provide some exemplary samples in your application. Pay careful attention to what the specific type of requirement is depending on your discipline. And for arts education organizations, make sure that you're also submitting a curriculum sample with your application. So take the time to make sure that you're providing something relevant of good quality. Remember that this is about the artistic quality of the organization. Part of that they're judging through the artistic samples. So you want to make sure they are looking at something that's impressive and that helps them to understand the quality of the programming, the uniqueness of the programming. They can see and hear what this programming looks like. If you have some audience images or footage of your audiences and how they're engaging with the work, that is also helpful. Remember not to submit flyers or reviews or brochures as your artistic samples. Those would not count as artistic samples. And also, if you're submitting a link, be careful with providing Instagram or Facebook or social media links. You want to make sure you're actually giving them something that they can review and that is not like a link to a page that they have to search through to find something to look at. Make sure that you also describe the sample in the application. You have a box to give them some a description, and you can use this to help them kind of understand what they're looking at, give credit to the photographer or the artist that whose work you might be showing. So use that description box to give a little bit more context and more information. If you're an arts education organization, you will have some additional requirements or questions to answer. So there are 3 different types of arts education organizations according to our program. So we delineate what our arts education programs are by giving you 3 categories, and you're basically defining which one based on what these definitions say. So we have in-school programming, which is service organizations who are delivering services during a part of the child's regular school day, in or out of school. And this includes in-school, in and off-site experiences in partnership with the school, like museum tours, artist residencies, field trips, or presentations during the school day. Out-of-school programming would be services provided in partnership with the school, and intended for enrollees of a respective school, but not provided during the school day. And then community-based programming are services provided to children or youth and or their families outside of school property and not in partnership with any particular educational institution. So if you're providing in-school programming, you are required to submit a curriculum sample with your application. Additionally, in the application, you will provide some additional information. You'll provide some details on who the teaching staff are, how they are holding, what standards they hold the students to, how you use, maybe you're using the VAPA standards of the state, the California State Curriculum Standards around visual and performing arts. You may want to use this link to figure out what those are and to kind of articulate in the application how you support the students in achieving those goals. Additionally, we invite any organization that has developed culturally relevant or responsive initiatives or partnerships or curricula to discuss these efforts as part of their application. We do now have a form in our application called the Levine Act Compliance form, or that's the short name. The long name is the Contribution and Agent Declaration form. This is in order to make sure that we have documented whether or not you comply with the Levine Act. It's a state bill that was implemented last year in 2024. That requires us to collect information about whether or not your staff and or board members have made financial contributions to any LA County officials before you apply for a grant. So this is information you'll have to fill out, and Model A fiscally sponsored organizations who are applying will need to make sure they've got that information for their fiscal sponsor as well. So you'll need to connect with them early to get that. You'll compile all this information. If there are contributions, you'll want to make sure you have that data and that you can answer questions about that in the application. So you'll fill out the form to the best of your ability to provide the information requested. In order to prepare this, you may want to check out this link here for our Levine Act webpage on our website. There is a recording there where we discussed this at length and answered questions. We are not allowed to give advice or answer questions specifically about your organization's situation. But you can use this 1-800 number here or this email address if you do have further questions. So what will we do with this form? The information on these forms will be kept on file by the Department of Arts and Culture for about a year. It will be analyzed to determine if any supervisors or other officers must recuse themselves from participating in the grant approval process. The information on the form will not be included in the panelist process or panelist review process and will in no way be considered in the evaluation, scoring, or determination of the grant awards. That said, it is important to make sure that the form is filled out entirely and to the best of your ability to avoid any complications, including penalties or disqualifications due to any inaccurate or incomplete submissions. Staff will only be reviewing for compliance. The analysis of the contents of the forms will be analyzed by a different county department and kept on file for a year. Okay, with that, here's a little bit of information about our SurveyMonkey Apply system, our grant portal. That is where you are going to be applying for your grant for the OGP program.